It begins in the frozen fields of Planefield, Wisconsin, November 16, 1957. Inside a small hardware store, blood led from the back room to a trail vanishing into the snow. The town's only widow, Bernice Worden, was gone. In her ledger, the last entry read simply, Ed Gein, antifreeze. Everyone thought he was harmless, a soft-spoken farmer who helped neighbors dig graves and fix roofs. Just another lonely man in a dying town. But when police pried open his farmhouse door, the scent inside told another story. Decay, varnish, and something faintly sweet. They called it the House of Horrors, though the reports were clinical, lampshades of skin, a human mask on a hook. Years later, Hollywood would soften it, turning cruelty into character study. But the crime scene photos remain, locked in state archives, graphite black and silent, proof that horror didn't begin in film reels. It began here. Planefield, Wisconsin, population barely 680 in 1957. One main street, 2 churches, and endless miles of empty farmland. Residents describe winters that seemed to stop time. You could hear snowflakes hit the window, one farmer said in a 1960 Wisconsin State Journal interview. The town breathed slowly between November and March, a place where everyone knew everyone, yet privacy was sacred. Edward Theodore Gein was born here in 1906, second son of an alcoholic father and a strictly religious mother, Augusta. School records describe him as quiet, obedient, reading at a grade higher than average. But neighbors would later recall odd rituals at the Gein farmhouse. Augusta forbidding other children to visit, nightly prayers about Jezebels and sin. The house sat a mile from any neighbor, its windows dark by sunset. By the time George Gein died in 1940 and Augusta in 1945, Ed was alone on the farm. Property tax ledgers from Washara County list the estate as unimproved building with clutter, already showing decay. The first reports of isolation came soon after. A smell locals thought was spoiled meat. No one asked further. In town, people nodded to Ed when he purchased groceries. They noticed his stammering voice, his averted eyes. Just shy, they told themselves. The county librarian recorded his regular visits to borrow medical textbooks. Checkout cards show titles like Human Anatomy and the Preservation of Tissue. When winter fell, his chimney smoke was the only movement for miles. Wind carried the sound of his radio across the fields. Neighbors who drove past noted curtains always drawn. No visitors, no Christmas lights, just stillness. On November 16, 1957, Bernice Worden's son, Deputy Sheriff Frank Worden, stopped by his mother's hardware store after a morning patrol. The door was unlocked, unusual for a Saturday when Bernice took inventory. He found the cash register open, streaks of blood across the floor, and a missing receipt book. It recorded one last sale. Ed Gein, antifreeze. The note, later preserved in the Wisconsin State, Crime Laboratory Archive became the first concrete link in a case that would rewrite forensic psychology textbooks. Frank's police radio call was logged at 4:45 p.m. His voice, according to dispatcher notes, was composed but tight. That evening, Sheriff Art Schlee and 3 investigators drove to Gein's farm on County Road D. Snow had begun to fall, blurring tire tracks. The temperature was 17 degrees, dropping. The front door was nailed shut, windows blacked out with newspaper. When they forced entrance through a side shed, their flashlight beams caught what one deputy called something hanging. It wasn't deer. The report, documented in Washara County Police Report W4087, describes the scene in measured language. Female torso, dressed out like venison, suspended from ceiling beam, identified via dental records as Bernice Worden, 58. The clinical words could not mask what they found. The sheriff vomited. Frank Worden stood outside, hands shaking. All he said later, "I thought it was a person," and it was. In the kitchen, investigators found unwashed dishes, canned food, and a pot of water boiling on the stove. A chair was pulled out as if someone had left mid-meal. The calendar on the wall showed hunting season dates circled in red. An officer's notebook entry reads, "House feels lived in, wrong kind of living." As they moved deeper into the farmhouse, flashlights revealed more. furniture fashioned from human parts, evidence bags piled up outside, tagged in sequence, breath fogging around each officer's mouth as they worked through the night. Inside, police cataloged over 40 human remains, bowls made of skulls, chairs upholstered in flesh, faces preserved with salt. Photographs remain sealed under restricted access. Only sketches from the 1957 coroner's inventory are public. The Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory assigned case number WL598 to the materials. On a dresser lay women's corsets made from skin, and atop a table, a photograph of Augusta Gein taken in 1941. Beneath it, the open Bible still marked at Matthew 5:29. "If thy right eye offend thee, pluck it out." The page was worn thin with handling. When questioned, Ed was calm. Transcripts reveal his words. "I didn't kill most of them. I just dug them up after dark, when the urge came." His voice was described as conversational, slightly hesitant throughout the 7-hour initial interview at the county building. He confessed to visiting 3 local graveyards, led officers to disturbed graves. The forensic team confirmed cloth fragments and missing remains corresponded to his notes. In his bedroom, police found detailed anatomical diagrams with female names penciled in margins. Neighbors said the town didn't sleep that winter. The local school canceled its Christmas fair out of respect. Church attendance doubled. Doors that had never known locks were bolted. The Planefield Sun's December 1957 headline read, "Ghastly crimes shake our quiet town." Its editor, Harold Benson, wrote, "We must ask ourselves what isolation does to a man's soul." The paper sold out 3 printings. When snow fell again, it covered the police tape around Gein's property. Children were forbidden to mention his name, parents checked windows twice before bed, and in farmhouse kitchens, conversations fell silent when strangers entered. The investigation had only begun to uncover what lay beneath Planefield's quiet surface. Between 1947 and 1954, at least 9 women vanished or were discovered missing from graves within 30 miles of Planefield. Cemetery caretaker Earl Blanc, in his 1958 testimony, recalled mounds of soft, sunken ground over winter graves. No one imagined grave robbery in a Lutheran cemetery. His maintenance logs showed regular visits to check for frost damage on nights of the new moon. Gein's notebook, found beside magazines on anatomy and pulp horror, listed the names of recently deceased women, all middle-aged, resembling his late mother. He described night vigils, digging under moonlight, and making a woman's suit. The handwriting was precise, almost elegant. Ink changed color between entries, suggesting regular documentation over years. Criminal psychologists later termed it maternal fixation. At the time, it was called evil. In church basements, prayer groups formed. On Sundays, the minister spoke of sin without naming it. As Dr. George Arnett wrote in his psychiatric evaluation, State of Wisconsin vs. Gein, 1958, patient exhibits a delusional world wherein maternal voice continues after death, moral sense fixed in fantasy, exhibits no remorse, only confusion at others' reactions. Gravediggers in 3 counties were interviewed. One remembered Ed offering help after funerals, always for certain kinds of burials. Another recalled him asking questions about soil depth and preservation. They thought he was studious, perhaps planning to open a funeral home. When investigators mapped the dates of disturbed graves against Gein's farm ledger, they found he often slaughtered livestock the day after a cemetery visit. The correlation suggested ritual, not coincidence. Every rural town has its ghosts. Here, they were cataloged, measured, and preserved in salt. The investigation expanded into cemetery records going back a decade. Exhumation orders were issued for 12 graves. Only 7 contained complete remains. Investigators matched remains to 2 known victims, Bernice Worden and Mary Hogan, a tavern owner missing since December 1954. Her tavern, Mary's Corner, still stands. Bullet holes from that night remain visible under repainting. Cash register records showed a single purchase, E. Gein 1 bottle schnapps. Patron Evelyn Hart, interviewed in 1957, remembered joking when Gein mentioned Mary. "She's at my place right now," he said, smiling. She thought it was his dry humor. The statement was filed in police records but not connected until after his arrest. Inside the farmhouse, police found Mary Hogan's head in a paper bag. The crime lab report number WL624 documents facial identification matched via dentures. A calendar in her tavern still showed December 8, 1954, the day she disappeared. No one had changed it in 3 years. It is one of the few times humor, denial, and horror intersect in official record, showing how unremarkable he seemed before the discovery. Locals later described him as invisible, present at church suppers, hardware stores, and town meetings, but never truly noticed. The investigation expanded to neighboring counties. Were there others? State police records list 17 unsolved disappearances within 50 miles between 1940 and 1957. Each case was reopened, though only 2 would be conclusively tied to Gein. Snow fell heavily that December. Roads to the Gein farm were impassable for days. Investigators noted in their log, site seems to resist documentation. Camera equipment malfunctioned in the cold. Films emerged overexposed or blank. An officer wrote, "The house doesn't want to be seen." As word spread, tourists began to appear. Cars with Illinois and Minnesota plates drove slowly past police barricades. A local officer noted, "They come to stare at nothing, just snow and sin." Security was posted at the property line. Still, footprints appeared each morning, circling the house. In the weeks following, Planefield became a siege. Reporters arrived from Milwaukee, Chicago, and Life magazine. Road patrol logs show over 10,000 visitors in December 1957, clogging rural lanes. The town's only restaurant ran out of food by noon each day. The motel's vacancy sign never lit. Local clergy held vigils. Reverend Jenkins of First Lutheran spoke of evil made domestic. Children were warned not to stray near County D. School attendance dropped 20%. Parents kept children home, just in case. Yet some locals blamed themselves for looking away. Mrs. Weiler, a neighbor, wrote in a 1958 letter to her sister, "We let him into our barns and kitchens. We pitied that man. I once gave him a Christmas plate. I wonder now what he ate from it." Her handwriting trembled visibly on the final lines. That line later inspired the title of a psychological dissertation, Pity and the Monstrous Self. Its author interviewed 26 Planefield residents between 1960 and 1962. Everyone remembered giving Ed something, a ride, a tool, a sympathy card when his mother died, kindness that now felt poisoned. The town's silence, its polite avoidance, became a national metaphor for repression. The crime wasn't just Gein's. It exposed a rural culture trained to ignore unease. Anthropologists later termed it collective blindness. In January 1958, the county library reported its highest circulation in history. Librarian records show titles on psychology, crime, and religious texts about demons checked out repeatedly. Newspapers from Madison and Milwaukee couldn't print enough copies to satisfy demand. While snow buried, the Gein farmed deeper, its story spread further. A New York publisher offered $20,000 for exclusive rights to Ed's journals. The county refused. A Hollywood producer inquired about filming locations. He received no response. Inside Planefield, conversations still stopped when strangers entered rooms. In March 1958, the Gein farmhouse was scheduled for public auction. Flyers advertised 150-acre farm with buildings, but locals refused to attend. A few nights before the sale, the house burned to ashes. Fire logs note, unknown source, no footprints, full structural loss. The blaze was visible for miles, orange against the night sky. No fire trucks were dispatched for 17 minutes after the first call. When they arrived, firefighters worked slowly, methodically, ensuring no ember survived. Insurance documents from Waushara County rate the fire as suspicious but not criminally pursued. There was relief. One witness, Stanley Adamski, claimed he saw the horizon light up like a furnace and said, "It was the only warmth that place gave." His statement appears in county records but was never followed up. Authorities found melted tools and remnants of bone in the debris. A rusted bed frame, photographed and published in the Milwaukee Journal, April 1958, became the last physical remnant of the Gein property. The paper caption read, "Where Evil Slept." It sold 50,000 extra copies. Planefield residents called it closure. Investigators called it erasure. Evidence that might have revealed additional victims or insights was lost. The sheriff's report concluded, "Fire of undetermined origin. Case segment closed." No suspects were ever named. The land remained untouched afterward. Farmers refused to plant there. A 1960 county attempt to sell the acreage found no buyers at any price. Today, trees have reclaimed the site. Only a depression in the earth marks where the foundation stood. Soil samples taken in 1962 by the University of Wisconsin revealed unusual chemical compositions, high calcium content consistent with bone ash. The study was quietly discontinued. Its partial results sit in university archives marked "Incomplete, Do Not Cite." Planefield hoped the fire would end the story. It only transformed it into legend. Psychiatric evaluation at Central State Hospital, Waupun, began March 1958. The admission photograph shows Gein in hospital clothes, expression neutral, hands folded in lap. His patient number was stenciled above his bed, 46372. Dr. Chester Peterzak's notes, now in Wisconsin Archives Collection 1307, detail a man with flat affect, calm voice, mild stammer, polite manners. He completed psychological tests willingly, scored above average on intelligence measures. Nurses recorded he thanked them for meals, kept his space tidy. When asked about wearing the human skin masks found in his home, he responded softly, "It made me feel closer to her, safer." The recording, preserved on magnetic tape, captures the quiet clicking of a Schoch wall clock between his words. Tests concluded schizophrenia, mixed type. He was deemed legally insane, unfit for trial. The state committed him indefinitely. Court documents from April 1958 note the ruling was uncontested. No family members appeared at the hearing. Over years, staff logs show routine entries: feeds birds outside window, enjoys comic strips, makes belts from cloth scraps, supervised. He received no visitors. Letters arrived addressed to him, most from true crime enthusiasts, but hospital policy screened all mail. The letters were archived unread. What disturbed attendants most was his laughter, sudden, low, like he was listening to someone unseen. Night staff noted he sometimes spoke to his mother as if she were present. One orderly requested transfer after finding Gein awake at 3 a.m., staring at the wall, smiling. In 1959, he was interviewed by researchers developing criminal profiling methods for the FBI. Their report described him as the prototype of the organized loner and superficially compliant while fundamentally detached. His case became foundational in understanding serial predators. Yet, in daily life, he remained unremarkable. Attendants described him as the quiet one. He aged slowly, separated from the town that made him and the town that failed to see. In 1958, the Waushara County Sheriff ordered all seized evidence sealed, but not all remained locked away. Traveling carnival promoters offered to buy Gein's car for sideshow display. It sold at auction for $760 to Bunny Gibbons, who exhibited it as the Ghoul Car across the Midwest. Crowds paid 25 cents to sit in it, despite local petitions. Newspapers called it a parade of morbidity. Children posed for photographs beside it. The car toured county fairs in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Illinois throughout summer 1958. Attendance records show over 30,000 paid viewers. Ethics debated, but fascination won. Even the burned soil of the Gein farm drew relic seekers. Local sheriff logs record 214 trespassing incidents in 1959 alone. Visitors took jars of ash, chunks of foundation, nails from the debris. Some left flowers, others curses scratched into trees. By 1962, Planefield passed ordinances prohibiting display of criminal artifacts. Still, Gein's legend escaped its borders. Photographs circulated among tabloids, each headline exaggerating what was already true. The Butcher of Planefield became a national figure. Children whispered his name in games. Museum curators from Chicago and New York inquired about acquiring items for criminology exhibits. All were denied. The Wisconsin Historical Society debated preservation of case materials, but ultimately restricted access to researchers with court approval only. Where horror should have ended, obsession began. Psychologists termed it trauma tourism, the need to touch darkness without understanding it. A Wisconsin sociologist wrote, "The Gein case reveals our fear isn't of monsters, but of neighbors we failed to recognize." In classrooms across America, criminal psychology courses used the case as primary material. The photographs and evidence logs became teaching tools. Students who had never heard of Planefield learned to recognize the clinical patterns of isolation, maternal fixation, and ritualized violence. Meanwhile, in Central State Hospital, Gein tended a small garden patch. Orderly logs note, patient shows unusual care for tomato plants. In 1958, Wisconsin-born writer Robert Bloch lived just 35 miles from Planefield. Local rumors of the case reached him through Milwaukee papers. In a later interview, Bloch said, "I realized the monster wasn't supernatural. He was a next-door type." His novel, Psycho, 1959, drew directly from the Gein archetype, a solitary man dominated by a dead mother's voice. Though names and details were changed, the psychological portrait remained recognizable to anyone familiar with the case. Yet, Bloch never visited the crime scene. His version transformed pathology into fiction, normalizing the rural nightmare into a psychological thriller. The published book sold modestly until Hollywood acquired the rights. Bloch's payment was $9,500 according to his financial records. When Hollywood adapted it, the set was pristine, symbolic, screaming women in black and white. The actual Gein house, blackened to ash, was never filmed. The fictional Bates house became more famous than the real farmhouse it echoed. Historical distance became comfort. The screenplay made the world forget the smell of that farmhouse. Cinema converted actual grief into entertainment. Ticket stubs replaced evidence tags. In Planefield, few saw the movie during its initial release. The town's only theater refused to show it. A newspaper editorial from 1960 stated, "Some wounds are too fresh for spectacle." Meanwhile, psychiatric journals published case studies of Gein without naming him directly. Medical libraries acquired these analyses, cataloging horror as science. 1960, Alfred Hitchcock releases Psycho. The film's success reopens wounds in Planefield. Residents received letters from tourists wanting directions to the real Bates house. Sheriff records show numerous trespass arrests on County D that summer. Mailboxes overflowed with requests for information, soil samples, photographs. Planefield High School librarian Margaret Fay kept a folder titled Media Inquiries, containing letters requesting tour passes. She later testified to the Wisconsin Historical Society that she burned them. "The town deserved to heal," her statement reads, "not become a sideshow." Hitchcock never mentioned Planefield by name, though early drafts did. The studio's records show legal advisors recommended detaching it from Wisconsin. Too recent, too raw. Production notes indicate conscious decisions to stylize the violence, making it symbolic rather than documentary. From that point, reality belonged to journalists, fantasy to film. The crime scene became an abstract myth, manageable only through cinema, polished fear replacing true grief. Audiences could experience controlled terror that ended when credits rolled. When interviewed in 1961, Planefield's mayor simply said, "That movie isn't our story." The statement appeared in small-town papers but never reached national press. Hollywood's version became the authorized narrative, but every story leaves stains on its ground. In Planefield, teenagers began daring each other to spend nights near the Gein property. Police logs show increased patrols. Parents complained about nightmares. The high school counselor noted a rise in anxiety cases. While the world watched Psycho, Planefield lived with real ghosts. For decades, Gein remained institutionalized until his death in 1984. He was buried beside his mother in Planefield Cemetery, under an unassuming gravestone that was repeatedly vandalized and finally stolen in 2000. Police recovered it in Seattle 5 years later. The stone now lies in secure storage, unmarked, but visitors still drive to the cemetery's southwest corner, guided only by online maps and silence. Groundskeeper Tom Casper told the Daily Tribune in 2012, "Every Halloween, they come. Always candles, sometimes dolls." His maintenance logs record regular cleanup of offerings left at the unmarked site. Photographs, letters, women's gloves. Locals report small offerings left under trees. Sometimes photographs, notes, sometimes women's gloves. The town stopped removing them. Cemetery records show increased security during October, but no incidents are documented. Only footprints in morning frost. An unconfirmed 2018 police note describes animal bones arranged in a cross found near the old Gein plot. No suspect was ever found. The bones were buried without ceremony. Some call it fascination, others penance. Psychologists term it dark tourism, the need to stand where evil happened, seeking understanding that archives cannot provide. Meanwhile, a new generation grows in Planefield, who know the story only as history. In local schools, the case is not discussed. Town council minutes from 2010 read, "Motion passed to deny filming requests related to the 1957 incidents. The town continues. The memory remains." In the basement archive of the Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory, the sealed evidence boxes remain. 12 in total, marked property of Washoe County, do not open without court authorization. Among them, report logs list a human mask preserved, numbered 7. The temperature is kept at a constant 58 degrees, humidity 40%. The staff rotation sheet notes numerous technicians requesting reassignment after working in Evidence Room C. When interviewed, retired clerk Helen Marlowe stated, "Some boxes feel heavier than they should. You can sense he's not gone. The idea of him, I mean." Her hands trembled slightly during the recorded interview. Researchers occasionally visit with new psychological methods seeking to reinterpret the Planefield butcher. Yet, they all pause before leaving, touching the archive door twice as if in apology. The sign-in book shows increasing interest from criminal psychology programs. The last entry in the visitor log reads simply, "November 2023, media request denied. Lights flickered during filing." The notation is initialed, not signed. Security cameras in the archive hallway occasionally malfunction at 3:17 a.m., the estimated time of Bernice Worden's death. As the final footage rolls, the narrator steps outside the Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory. Snow drifts into the parking lot light. They whisper, almost ritualistically, "Good night, Mrs. Worden. I won't open the file again." They do not record the last shot. The camera remains pointed at the closed door, red light blinking, picking up distant wind.